What a wonderful morning for Fletcher and for me to be with you again. We came down last night to the beautiful concert which was given of folk songs conjuring up lovely areas of the world. And I think, as was said last night, the songs are so often of a slight sadness because so many of them have been written by people who are away from home and are feeling that sense of, oh, this is awakening in me, a love of where I really belong. Well, the whole world is our parish, really, and so as we go around, we find tremendous welcome wherever, with the Episcopal or Anglican Church throughout the world, and we would convey that to you. Things are in good heart in so many places. At the same time, this morning we are given the pleasure of those wonderful lessons from Job and also the Psalm 104, which speak of the glory of creation and all the creatures within it, but also speak of the power of creation, which make us feel, with our puny powers, really inadequate. We look around the world, and England this morning is being battered by Hurricane Ashley, I think. They name them with such grand names, and yet it means they're being given floods and all sorts of things. And we've watched the south of France during the last week with motor cars being just flooded out, down streets and out to sea almost. And you wonder at the power of creation and what we are doing to our planet. But we all know these things now, and it's our bounden and godly duty to take care of that. Nothing could have been more beautiful than driving down here last night. We came down not on the 95, which was rather crowded, but on the other road, which gave us more trees and the sunset on those beautiful trees. And I think that so many people would have paid to have a holiday amongst those trees because it was just New England with its best colours. But this morning, almost better, as we drove out of New Haven onto the 95, now completely empty, and saw sunrise over the ocean, and everything was so utterly peaceful and still. It's the way God speaks to us through his creation, and it's the way Jesus teaches us by causing us to think in small local parables about what the creation and what human life and what human affection and what human community mean to us. If I think back over a long ministry, I can think of so many wonderful communities in churches, not only in England, but in places that I've been sent in southern Africa and right across the world, who have given me a home as though I were a member of their family. Extended family is just taken for granted in African households. And so to be received with great politeness and then to be rested before ever you're asked what your business is there is something which I've learned to treasure. And if we look at the Gospels this morning and the way in which St. Mark's Gospel here in St. Mark's Church is read week by week in this sequence of readings of our Christian year, we find ourselves in homely Galilee, a very, very small part of our world. The Holy Land, we call it. But at the moment, of course, riven with warfare and terrible fear about what may happen in that whole area. And yet, this passage takes us back to the threats that Jesus himself was receiving and the tensions belonging to Jesus within that ministry of his messiahship. He was there with a group of friends, and if tradition serves us right, then James and John, who are the leading characters in this story, were members of his family, his blood family, not just his extended family. So they feel a particular closeness to him. And so they should not have got this wrong. But they do get it spectacularly wrong. For Jesus has been teaching them, as they've gone through, what true glory is like. And true glory isn't all about power and kingly status. True glory is the giving of oneself entirely to the needs of others so that they feel the same giftedness as they do with the creation of God, with the sunshine waking them, and with all around on lovely days, but at the same time, the gathering of the clouds to give water to the earth to keep it green. True glory is found there. And Jesus has been trying to explain that to them over and over again. 3 times in this short gospel of St. Mark, he tells them what's going to happen in Jerusalem. And the first time, what happens is that Peter takes him aside and says, "No, no, Lord, that can't happen to you." And to Jesus, that is one of the temptations in the wilderness that he had had to fight off before ever embracing his vocation as our Messiah, as the Christ, the Anointed One. This won't happen to you. And the reaction is so strong from Jesus that Peter, his chief disciple, has got this so wrong that he turns on him and says, "Get thee behind me, Satan." He's speaking a temptation that Jesus is afraid of, because it's always been one of Jesus' own temptation. And he knows it's diametrically opposed to what his messiahship should be. Time 2, and once again, when he explains everything to them, and this is a short gospel and he's giving them 3 chances, on the second occasion, exactly the same thing happens. They don't understand. And on the third occasion, well, here we are today. He is set out exactly what it means to be the Son of Man and the Son of God. This is a day when the Epistle to the Hebrews gives us in full measure the humanity of our great high priest. Not a high priest who is lifted well above all suffering, but a high priest who has shared every ounce of our human condition, our human suffering. And therefore we can be totally confident of his gifts as our high priest. But James and John have got it wrong. They come up to him and say, "We've got a big favor to ask." They could have said, "Cousin Jesus." And instead, they ask something which floors Jesus. I remember an occasion when I was at seminary when one of the tutors had just given a heartfelt talk to us which delved deep into his own life. And I came back with a response, which wasn't flippant. I was doing my best, though I hadn't really understood what he'd said. And he said, "Robert, by saying that, you make me realize you haven't understood a word of what I've said in the last half hour." So I felt ashamed, and no doubt he was right, and I learned the lesson. But here is Jesus, and he answers them, "You know not what you ask. Can you drink the cup that I drink from, and be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" And they say quite cheerfully, "We can." And he looks at them again and looks far, I think, into the future and says, "You will indeed drink the cup that I drink from and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit on my right and my left in heavenly glory, that's not for me even to give." He could have said, "Not for me even to think about." that belongs to a completely different world and to a completely different landscape. How many years after this is St. James the Great actually lying on the road in Jerusalem, cut down and the first of the apostles to die by Herod's swordsmen? And John, well, if Christian tradition is right, and the best textual evidence to suggest it is, John would live a very long life and still be preaching in Ephesus. And old Polycarp, one of the bishops who lived a very long time in those days, said that you'd heard him preach. And his sermon, perhaps you'd rather have this, his sermon was just, little children, love one another. 4 words. They carried him into the pulpit, and the aged Apostle John said to them all, little children, love one another. You can hear that message right through the epistles of the Johannine community and right through the Gospel of St. John, the Gospel which is built up in the community who were his disciples later. And that aspect of loving one another is the way in which Christ calls us to drink that cup. And he gives us one of the best sermons of all. I said in the podcast that I can't hear this lesson without remembering our late Queen's Golden Jubilee, when the coronation coach was rolled out from Buckingham Palace and military bands and processions led all the way through London with her up to St. Paul's Cathedral. And what did she want read when she got there? For all of us to hear, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Let the one who is great among you be your minister, and the one who would have any kind of power and influence among you be the willing slave of all. That's where we are. And we're given the talents and gifts to exercise that. I don't know how many people are sitting in church this morning, but there must be an amazing number of different talents which you will have been discovering through your lives, some quite late on in life. And yet, think how many there are here in St. Mark's Church this morning, as Jesus gives that command and gives the illustration. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. We set out on beautiful days like this, and we set out on dismal days in our own lives, or dismal days in the weather. It matters not. The vocation is the same for each of us, but it's certainly not the same for us to give the same as our next door neighbor, for they will be full of other talents, and we shall thank God for them, for the talents they're giving to us. And you'll think at the end of the day, how glad I was that I met Mildred or Harry this morning, because they were just the sort of person that I needed at that point. They had the gifts. They noticed how to give encouragement. And it's our daily task to do that. There are people waiting for a note, a telephone call, or a visit, just to be encouraged so that the cup that they have to drink will be made easier for them to drink it. We can't take away all sorrow from this world. This is a finite world, and there is much pain and sorrow within it. We can't take away all hostility and warfare, but we can look around and see the hungry when they're in need, and those who, by, I don't know, a donation, or by some kind of other activity which is special to us, can benefit our world at this point. This is a morning when we hear of the loveliness and power of the creation and the power of the Creator. But it's also a morning when Jesus resists all false forms of glory for his people, and instead tells them that true service is the great form of glory. Yes, our Queen wanted us to hear that, and the sentence before. The kings of the earth lord it over their subjects, and their great ones make their power felt. But it must not be so with you. With you, the one who is greatest must be your servant, and the one who has power over you must be the willing slave of all. Please God that it may be so, because there are so many decisions, political ones and other decisions of state among the councils of Europe, about the elections happening here, being made at the moment. And each of those seeking high office must have deep within their heart to be a true servant. Then that service must be for all for whom they will take responsibility. And even the casting of a vote helps that on its way. So God bless us all in this beautiful world, in this fractured world, in this suffering world, but in this world where each of us, in the most simple ways, can drink the cup given to us and then assist those who have the cup of their own life given to them and help them drink it to the glory of God and the care of his people. Amen.